On March 27, 1977, the Tenerife Airport disaster claimed the lives of 583 people, making it the deadliest aviation accident in history. The disaster occurred when two Boeing 747 jumbo jets collided on the runway at Los Rodeos Airport, now Tenerife North Airport, on the Spanish Canary island of Tenerife. This tragedy was the result of a series of miscommunications, poor visibility due to heavy fog, and unfortunate circumstances. This narrative explores the events leading up to the disaster, the tragic collision, and the lessons learned from one of the most infamous incidents in aviation history.
Los Rodeos Airport on Tenerife is a relatively small airport, but on March 27, 1977, it was overwhelmed with heavy air traffic. The nearby Gran Canaria airport had been closed earlier that day due to a terrorist bombing threat, forcing many planes, including large commercial jets, to be diverted to Los Rodeos. Among these planes were KLM Flight 4805 and Pan Am Flight 1736, both Boeing 747 jumbo jets. The airport's sudden influx of planes caused significant congestion on the ground, with aircraft parked on the taxiways due to a lack of space. As a result, planes had to taxi on the runway before taking off, adding to the complexity of the situation. Weather conditions at the airport worsened throughout the day, with heavy fog severely reducing visibility.
Both KLM Flight 4805, captained by Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten, and Pan Am Flight 1736, captained by Victor Grubbs, were on the ground at Tenerife, waiting for clearance to take off once Gran Canaria Airport reopened. The foggy weather made communication between the pilots and the control tower critical, but the situation was complicated by language barriers, radio static, and unclear instructions. The confusion began as both planes were instructed to taxi down the single runway, with the Pan Am aircraft being told to taxi to the end of the runway and turn off at the third exit, while the KLM plane was instructed to prepare for takeoff. However, as the KLM aircraft began its takeoff roll, the Pan Am plane was still on the runway, having missed the correct taxiway exit due to poor visibility and unclear signage. The miscommunication that followed would prove fatal. The KLM crew, misunderstanding their clearance, believed they had been authorized to take off, while the Pan Am crew was unaware that the KLM plane had started its takeoff. As the two planes moved toward each other in the thick fog, disaster became imminent.
The KLM 747 began its takeoff roll at full speed, while the Pan Am 747 was still slowly taxiing down the runway in thick fog, trying to find the correct exit. The pilots of the Pan Am plane saw the KLM jet barreling toward them at the last moment, but by then it was too late. Captain Grubbs of the Pan Am jet attempted to turn sharply to avoid the collision, while the KLM captain, realizing the Pan Am plane was still on the runway, desperately tried to pull his jet into the air. The two planes collided at high speed. The nose gear and lower fuselage of the KLM jet struck the upper fuselage of the Pan Am plane, tearing through it and igniting a massive fire. The KLM jet crashed back onto the runway and exploded, killing all 248 people on board instantly. On the Pan Am plane, there were 396 people aboard. The front portion of the aircraft was largely intact, and some passengers managed to escape the burning wreckage, but 335 people perished in the crash and subsequent fire. Only 61 people, including Captain Grubbs, survived the disaster by evacuating through the broken fuselage before the flames consumed the aircraft.
The Tenerife Airport disaster resulted in the deaths of 583 people, making it the deadliest aviation accident in history. The tragedy left an indelible mark on the aviation industry, highlighting critical flaws in communication, safety protocols, and runway management during poor visibility. Investigations into the disaster found that a combination of factors contributed to the collision. These included miscommunication between the KLM crew and air traffic control, a lack of standardized phraseology in aviation communication, and the challenging conditions caused by the heavy fog. The KLM captain had misunderstood his takeoff clearance, while the Pan Am crew had difficulty navigating the runway exits due to the poor visibility. One of the most significant lessons learned from the Tenerife disaster was the importance of clear and unambiguous communication between pilots and air traffic control. As a direct result of the accident, the aviation industry adopted new standards for cockpit communication. The implementation of standardized aviation phraseology, including specific terms like takeoff clearance and hold short, aimed to eliminate ambiguity during critical moments. Pilots were also trained to use more assertive communication in the cockpit, particularly during situations where safety is at risk. Additionally, the concept of crew resource management (CRM) was further emphasized in pilot training. CRM focuses on effective teamwork, communication, and decision-making within the cockpit, ensuring that all crew members feel empowered to voice concerns if they perceive a potential hazard. The Tenerife disaster also led to improvements in airport infrastructure. Airports with high traffic volumes implemented better runway signage, lighting, and markings to help pilots navigate in low visibility conditions. Procedures for handling congested runways and taxiways were also revised to prevent similar incidents in the future.
The Tenerife Airport disaster stands as a tragic reminder of how multiple factors, miscommunication, poor visibility, and operational pressures, can converge to create a catastrophic event. The loss of 583 lives on that foggy day in 1977 remains a solemn chapter in aviation history, but the lessons learned from the disaster have significantly improved safety protocols and communication standards in the industry. The legacy of the Tenerife disaster is one of transformation, as it spurred important changes that continue to make air travel safer for millions of passengers worldwide.